Mindset, a daily dose of practical wit and wisdom with a professional educator and trainer, Amazon best-selling author, United States Marine, television and radio host, Paul G. Markle. Each episode will focus on positive and productive ways to strengthen your mindset and help you improve your relationships, career goals, and overall well-being. Please welcome your host, Paul G. Markle.
Hello, welcome back. It's that time again for Morning Mindset. And today I'm going to do something that's a little bit topical. I know that I try and keep these universal. I've always tried to do that so that no matter when you listen to it, whether it's sometime in the distant future or recent past or what have you, that it will apply. And I'm taking it a little bit of a risk because this is going to be a bit of a pop culture reference. The movie Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie by the title of that name, was just recently released. It's a biography film about the band Queen and their lead singer, Freddie Mercury, who died in 1991. And I took my son and I went and we watched the movie this past weekend, and I really enjoyed it. And one of the reasons I really enjoyed it, or I believe I did, was because the music of Queen was very, very important in my childhood. It was very popular. They were at the height of their fame right during my formative years, the late 1970s on into the 80s. And that's when they were, they released We Will Rock You and News of the World and The Game with Another One Bites the Dust and Under Pressure with David Bowie and so on and so forth. A lot of big, big songs that obviously got a lot of airplay. And if you're anyone, and I don't know about young people today, I mean, I guess they do, but everybody since the invention of radio has had a soundtrack to their youth. Whether, I remember when I was a young child, in like elementary school, early elementary school, I remember my dad and my mom listening to what were called at the time oldies stations. That's right. My mom and dad, I'm driving around in the car in the station wagon in the back seat, and my parents are listening to at the time was called the oldies station. And what was on the oldies station? Music from the 50s and 60s, I don't know. Do they still have radio stations that they call the oldies stations? I don't know if they do. I think the current thing is classic rock, right? Classic rock is for people in their 40s and 50s and maybe even 60s. So, Chuck Berry and basically the music you would have heard on the TV show Happy Days, that was a soundtrack of my mom and dad's generation. And my soundtrack included a lot. Included Ted Nugent and the Romantics and the Knack and My Sharona and of course a lot of the big bands and so forth. But my soundtrack also included Queen. Now the movie is going to mean different things to different people. A young person who never knew the band Queen as an active band. Now, I understand that Brian May and Roger Taylor, that they have done special concerts and they've done some tours and they've put together some music. They worked with Paul Rogers and some other artists. But essentially, after Freddie Mercury passed away, after his death, the original quartet, the original four guys, and the creative magic that they were able to, put together ended with his death. And if you're under 30, you never knew of Queen or Freddie Mercury being alive. I mean, he's been dead for not quite 30 years now. So think about that. You're talking to somebody that's 28, 29 years old. It's music. Basically, to them, it's history. They may see this picture and think that the picture somehow is a call for like gay rights advocacy or what have you. And I'm afraid what's going to get lost in that is the fact that the band like many of the great acts from the 60s, 70s, 80s, I know, like I sound like a classic rock guy, 60s, 70s, 80s, and today. Yeah. Now, these bands, there was no American Idol back then. There was no Dancing with the Stars. There was no America's Got Talent, or there was none of that. You had teenagers that just had passion and drive, and some of them actually had genuine talent. And some of these people with talent found each other. And through that passion and drive and sacrifice, all the old bands that you consider to be these super bands, if you look at their stories, they weren't handpicked by a studio. Studio executives didn't go out and recruit all these people, assemble them as a band, and put them out in front of the world. No, they did things like, they played a gig at a nightclub for, $50, and they had to divide the $50 4 ways and pay their bar tab and pay for their fuel and gas. And by the time they did all of that, they basically had played for free. If you were able to watch some of these documentaries of the original bands, Rush or Queen or, The Who or you name it, a lot of these bands, these guys were just paying their dues. They were struggling, they were sacrificing, and a lot of, for instance, in the band Queen, all of the guys in the band, Brian May was like a physicist. He was studying like astrophysics. And I can't remember, John Deacon was electrical engineering, and then, Roger Taylor was studying to be a dentist. So they weren't idiots. They weren't bums. But they sacrificed in order to achieve something that many people probably would look at today and say was pretty great. They put everything together, and they became a talent that even though they haven't made or produced new music for 30 years or so, almost 30 years, people are still listening to and appreciating today. And that is what I would hope that people would get from the movie Bohemian Rhapsody. The fact that I know there's the human drama, there's the and you have to have that in movies. You have to have drama in the movies to keep it interesting for the audience. You can't just tell the story exactly as it was, because most people's story exactly as it was isn't that interesting. But in this situation, I really hope that the genius, the musical genius and talent of Freddie Mercury and Brian May and Roger Taylor and John Deacon, that's not lost, that it's not lost behind this Hollywood contrived, political correctness, shall we say, or social consciousness or whatever. The fact of the matter is that 4 individuals came together. They took their individual talents, they combined them with the others, and they came up with something that was tremendous, something that we can enjoy today, years and years and years later. I mean, they started in the early 1970s, and here we are today appreciating and enjoying the music that they left us. And one other thing that I came away with, and many of you, if you listen to this program, if you listen to Morning Mindset, and you watch the movie, and then if you're a geek like me, and after the movie you went and watched the behind-the-scenes interviews with Brian May and Roger Taylor, and the actors that were involved in it and so forth. And a lot of people are very sad that Freddie Mercury, he contracted HIV, and he died of pneumonia in 1991. And he was only 45 years old, and people felt that it was a tragedy that we lost him so relatively early in his life. And it was. But Brian May and Roger Taylor are now in a position to do what? They lost their friend, but they're here to tell the story. Sometimes you are the story, and sometimes it's up to you to be the storyteller. Right now, you're drawing oxygen on planet Earth. You are working on your story, and someday your story will be told. And that was exactly what went down in the movie Bohemian Rhapsody. So it's rated PG-13. If you're worried about, I wouldn't take young kids to see it, but certainly teenagers, junior high, and older kids I would take to see it. I hope you guys go to see it, and I hope you enjoy the music and the experience. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is that. I am your host, Paul Markle, and I will talk to you again real soon.
Thank you for spending time with us today. To get show notes, submit a topic request, and for more from your host, Paul G. Markle, visit morningmindsetpodcast.com. That's morningmindsetpodcast.com. Please leave a review for this podcast on your favorite podcast player. We appreciate your time and effort, and we look forward to reading your honest feedback.